Hey everyone. Hey, I'm Jimmy. I'm alcoholic. Grateful to be alive and sober. And it's always customary where I came from to let you know that I have a home group on the Jersey Shore. I live down here on the Jersey Shore. It's called the Design for Living Group. I just left it. We just had our Sunday night big book study meeting, and in the bitter cold of New Jersey right now, which is about 15 degrees down by me. And so all you LA guys, you tough guys, I don't know. I don't know if the last time you were in 4-degree weather, but it's no pleasure, that's for sure. But I got a home group. I have a sponsor. His name is Bob B from St. Paul, Minnesota. Sponsor a lot of guys, but most importantly, I've been sober since my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that was on March 28th, 1987. So I'm an old man, and I'm so old, I don't even remember where we met, Everly, but thank you for remembering that. And thank you for chairing this meeting because you did a great job at it opening up. I know there's a lot of readings here, and I'm not a CA member. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I've been to many CA meetings and spoken a bunch of them. So I just found out what I'm doing about 5 minutes ago, so I'm excited by that. A topic and a 50-minute talk. I thought it was a 10-minute little, let's pick out something and go around the room, but that's all good. So I've told this story probably a million times. I was standing in this railroad room apartment on the Jersey side of the Hudson River overlooking New York City, and I was getting that spiritual test, the test that maybe some of you guys have gotten in the past. And this gentleman was in this room and he was peppering me with a few questions. And the first question he asked me was, how long can you hold your breath? How long can you hold your breath, Jimmy? How long can you be in a 12-step program and not work the 12 steps? Second question he asked me was, what does your relationship with God look like? And, I'm a Catholic. I guess I believe in God, but what does God have to do with any kind of recovery? Then the third question, he goes, what makes you alcoholic? And the best I could stammer out of my mouth in that moment was, I drink too much. I had no idea about the physical allergy. I had no idea about the mental obsession. I drink too much. And then he asked me a question that maybe some of you guys in LA won't believe, but this is the way it was. He asked me, he goes, Jimmy, where's your big book? And I looked at him and I said, what's a big book? Now, I'm not embarrassed by those answers. I'm probably more embarrassed to let you know that I was a 5-year member of Alcoholics Anonymous at that point. Not drinking, going to meetings, active member of a group, and dying from something I didn't even know I was dying from. That's untreated alcoholism. But then he asked me a question that maybe it applies to some of you, maybe it doesn't. But he looked at me and said, Jimmy, if AA works, why do you have so many problems? Because the truth of the matter was, I'm not working AA. I've fallen under the delusion. And the delusion is that, I think abstinence is the solution to a spiritual malady. I think just not drinking. I think just not taking drugs. I think that if I just don't do those things, everything should fall in place. And at 5 years separated from my last drink, guess what? My life was in shambles. And I didn't understand why. I was born and raised in northern New Jersey. I was born and raised in a very tough neighborhood. I was born and raised right right across from New York City. I'm 67 years old. I grew up in a very blue-collar, tough neighborhood. Everyone was a cop. Everyone was a fireman. Everyone was a union worker. Everyone was a criminal. There was just tough neighborhood. And I grew up at a time when all the dads stayed home. I mean, all the dads worked, all the moms stayed home. The only requirement for membership in a neighborhood was 5 or more kids. So there was always big houses, big families, big things going on. At all these things that we used to do in the neighborhood, birthday parties, christenings, graduations, whatever it was. One of the things that was always there was king alcohol. And we say it all the time, but alcoholism is a disease of perception. The way I would look at drinking is that drinking equates to fun. I would look at my old man. I would look at the neighbors. I would look at my older brothers. It seemed like when they drank, they seemed to have a lot of fun. It seemed like there was some sort of freedom in their life, like problem solved. There was nothing to worry about when they drank. And I had this guy called Dad. Dad's cunning, baffling, powerful. My old man's a real tough guy. My old man's a butcher. He always has blood on him. I don't know if he killed a cow that day or beat somebody up at a red light, but that's the kind of guy he was. He would have been 99 years old last Monday. He comes from that generation of World War II vet. Not This is not to throw all that generation under the bus, but he was just a guy that he was a great provider, but he never talked about anything. You know, he never talked about emotions. He never talked about his day. He never talked about anything. You know, he was just a. You know, I think if we brought a therapist in here right now and analyzed my old man, you know, they would have said he had PTSD from World War II. You know, so he was just that kind of guy. He never talked about anything. You know, uh, but he was a great provider. Put five of us through major universities in the United States. You know, but my dad was cunning. My dad was powerful. My dad was baffling. You know, every night at 5 o'clock, my old man would walk in the house huffing and puffing about something, and you know, my mom would make these two pitchers, one called martinis and the other one called Manhattans. And what would happen on these days, my dad would take that first drink, and he became a different person. He became a guy that, you know, wanted to have a catch in the backyard. He became a guy that wanted to talk about his day. He became a guy that even had a joke once in a while. But don't let me fool you, there were those days, and those days looked something like this in my house. My dad would take that first drink, and all of a sudden the kitchen plates would be flying across the kitchen. Kitchen chairs would be flying across the kitchen. If you grab one of us young kids, we'd be flying across the kitchen. So a lot of nights in my house about 5:02, me, my two brothers, and my two sisters would be under the covers waiting for the tornado to roar through the house. And when everything settled down, we'd walk out into the living room, walk out into the kitchen, you know. Hey, Mom, ain't it grand? The wind stopped blowing. And we would never discuss what just went on in my home. Now, none of that makes me alcoholic, but I'm a kid that grows up with a tremendous amount of fear. I'm a kid that grows up with a tremendous amount of insecurity. I'm a kid that grows up with a lot of secrets. You see, if you come from my family, you even come from my neighborhood, what goes on in your house and what goes on in your neighborhood never leaves those places. So you learn to internalize a lot of your emotions. So by the time I'm 10, 11, 12 years old, I'm a pretty angry kid. And I don't know why I'm so angry. I'm just angry, right? I'm pissed off about everything. I hate my father. I have daddy issues. That came right into AA with me, right? I love my father and I don't understand my father. I play my mother against my father. You know, I steal from my father and I fight with my father. I want my father dead a lot of times too. You know, I just didn't understand why he was such a violent person. So all that fear of violence and all that fear of loud noises, all that fear of all that kind of way of living just came with me through pretty much a lot of part of my life. You know, I grew up at a time when your mom would open up the door at 8 o'clock in the morning and they push all the kids out. She knew you'd come back home eventually, right? So most of my young life was on the streets. And most of my young life, you know, was hanging out with guys that are a lot older than me. You know, I'm 13, 14, 15 years old. And, you know, I'm a chameleon. I want to be who you want me to be. I'll pretend to be who you want me to be. And I always want to fit in because I always feel separate from. So I need to be part of. So I'll start to do things that these guys were doing. And what they were doing were illegal things. So I became a little thief. I became a little criminal. I became a guy that was robbing cars and robbing trains and doing that kind of stuff, getting in a lot of trouble. One of the things I learned when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous is not only is my drinking progressive, but my behaviors were progressive. So I was getting in trouble pretty consistently. But you see, this mom and dad that I had, you know, I always like to joke around and say I was born perfect and I was quickly handed over to these two character defects called mom and dad, you know, because I'm the type of guy, and I'm sure there's nobody on this meeting right now that blames anyone for the way you feel, but I blame them for everything. You know, and all my parents ever tried to do to me was give me morals, values, a good education. And all I ever did for my parents early on was I rolled any kind of goodness into a nice little ball and I stuffed it right down their throats. And I introduced my parents to a way of life that they never even knew existed. So I started to get in a lot of trouble. But I had that day that everyone on this call right now had. And that's the day I had my first drink or your first drug, or whatever that is. I'm 13 years old. My parents just took me out of the public school system where I had a sense of ease and comfort because I felt comfortable being around the guys that I was growing up with. We were all like the same. We all had the same dad. We all had the same families. It was just bizarre. But I know that when we were in the schoolyard and we were playing ball and we were playing basketball and baseball and doing all the things that, you know, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old kids were doing, there was a sense of ease and comfort with that. But see, what I didn't understand, my parents wanted something better for me. So they took me out of the public school system, took me across town, and dropped me in the Catholic school system where I knew nobody. And all of a sudden, the square peg in a round hole shows up. And now this feeling of separation, this feeling of difference, this feeling I don't belong shows up. And all these inadequacies and all these insecurities and all these things like that. I don't even know how to talk about when I'm at that age. I mean, God, I was in AA for a long time before I even understood this spiritual malady I suffer from. But that's when I find myself in a cemetery with 5 guys that I know to this day. I'm about to take my first drink. And here comes that first bottle. It's called Colt 45 malt liquor. And I put my hand in there with a tremendous amount of fear because I don't know what's going to happen if I drink. And I grab the neck of that bottle and I start drinking that Colt 45 malt liquor. Here comes the second bottle. It's called Mohawk Blackberry Brandy. And I start drinking on that blackberry brandy. Let me tell you about my first night drinking at 13 years old. Blacked out, puked purple for about 2 weeks. My father beat the crap out of me. And my mother apparently grounded me for life. But the hook was in. The hook was in. I found the thing that settled this thing down, whatever this thing is. Later on, when I come into Alcoholics Anonymous, the old timers explain what that was. They would say, Jimmy, alcoholism is a soul sickness caused by a separation from God and a disconnect from each other. From a young age, I've been building walls, walls of blame, walls of alibis, walls of excuses, walls of rationalization, justification, victimization, you name it. I can never look at Jimmy. I had to look at you and blame you for everything. So here I am at 13 years old, get my first load on. Little do I know, I just stepped on a path that goes straight to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. And if you don't know what those big words mean, I went straight to hell. And that doesn't mean I didn't have a good time drinking. I had a great time drinking until it wasn't great. I had a fun time drinking until it wasn't fun. Because see, I didn't understand the disease of alcoholism. And every time I picked up that first drink, it just got progressively worse, progressively worse. And back where I grew up, drinking was, drinking age was 18 back then. But if your chin could hit a bar, you were getting served whenever. And I was getting served in these old man shot and beer places at 15 years old. And that just became a way of life, hanging out in the bars with these old guys and my friends who can get served. And I'm not going to bore you, and I know I have to come up with a topic, but I just wanted to set the table with that because, my life is just not a life of rosiness, my life has been rough at times, right? And so I'm that double-edged sword guy you might hear about, or maybe you're one of those guys, the guy that blames everyone for everything in your life. It's never my fault. I'm always pointing fingers, right? And as I'm getting locked up and getting in trouble and getting drunk and all the things, and my mother bailing me out consistently, going to a good high school, going to a college, getting in trouble, getting thrown out of college, coming back to New Jersey, what am I going to do? And this basically starts my 8 o'clock in the morning drinking, trying to figure out my life down at the corner bar. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And what I don't understand is the disease of alcoholism, because once I take that first drink, all bets are off. That's probably the stupidest thing I've ever heard when I first came to AA. The first drink gets you drunk. I think it's the last 20. I think it's the outside issues. I have no idea about the physical allergy towards to booze. So here I am, I'm trying everything to try to do something in my life. All these inadequacies and fear, running with guys I shouldn't be running with, doing the things I shouldn't be doing, scared all the time, but I would do them anyway because I want to be part of rather than separate from. I didn't know that. And what happened to me, guys that I was hanging out with started to move on with their life. They started to get jobs in Wall Street over in New York City. They started to start families. They started to do all these things that looked attractive. I didn't know how to pull that off. But I'm in a bar one day and I meet a girl and I wound up, meeting this girl, and 7 months later I'm married. Because I'm under the delusion, because you see, alcoholism doesn't come in a bottle, it comes in my mind. And my mind is filled with a lot of delusions and distortions about a lot of things. And one of the biggest delusions is that there's a shiny object out there that's going to make this inside feel better. And whether that's cars, money, women, drugs, alcohol, I am convinced that there's something external in the material world that I could get that's going to make me feel good about me. And the truth of the matter is that chase never happens. So here I am, I'm in this marriage, and 4 months into the marriage, I walk out of the marriage because I don't know how to be a married man, because I have the inability not to drink. I got to drink. I want to drink. Matter of fact, I don't even think drinking is a problem. With all the chaos that's going on in my life, I think drinking is normal because I equate my drinking with circumstances. So you see, if you had my old man, you drink too. If you had no money in your pocket, you drink too. If you had to get locked up, you drink too. I mean, I have excuses and excuses and excuses why I drink. I can't get down to the truth about why I feel the way I feel. So I run out of this marriage and blow up my life. And I take off for a place called Boca Raton, Florida. And I'm down there and I'm getting that knock at the door. I'm 27 years old. My life's in shambles and I can't even see it. But you see, I still have an answer. It's called Johnny Walker Red. And all I need to do is crack the seal of that bottle and take that first drink. And all of a sudden, nothing's my fault. It's all your fault. And I'm getting that knock at the door of the four horsemen of terror, frustration, bewilderment, despair. I'm always restless, irritable, and discontent about everything. I'm always annoyed. I'm always angry. I don't know how to experience joy. You can put a brand new baby in my hands, and that's whatever. Right? And what happens is I make a decision to come back to Jersey, and I haven't talked to my family. I haven't talked to the wife in limbo. And what happens is I make a decision to just hang out for a day and try to figure it out. And little did I know, for the next 18, 19 months of my life, I would live homeless on the streets of northern New Jersey and lower Manhattan, New York City, doing what we like to call the aimless walk. Traumatic, dehumanizing. I don't even have enough adjectives to put. And if you've been on the streets one day, you know that one day on the streets is just one day too many for anyone. Selling your blood, stealing, robbing, getting locked up, jumping turnstiles, getting arrested by the Port Authority police on a consistent basis, doing all those things that this wasn't the plan for life. This wasn't my plan for life. It wasn't my parents' plan for life for their son. Everyone else in my family was normal until I showed up. So what happened to me after about 19 months of doing that, living that way of life, I walked in a bar one night and the guy said to me, "Hey, Jimmy, they're hiring guys like you in Newark Airport." And there used to be an airline called People's Express that would hire guys like us. And the idea of the job was to take the luggage and put it on the plane, load airplanes. And I remember going the next day after I met that guy with two other guys. We robbed a car. I like to say borrow because the window was open and the keys were in it. The police had robbed it. All three of us are now sober over 38 years. We all made amends to that guy, which is kind of comical. Well, we go to Newark Airport and it was like a little interview process. Can you lift the suitcase? Yeah, you're hired. I mean, it was really simplicity. Well, what happened to me was I walked out and I sat in a room and I'm looking at you guys in your bridge house over there, just the way you guys are sitting right there. That's what it looked like in Newark Airport that day. I walked out and I sat in a chair just like that. I couldn't tell you how I felt. I was 29 years old. I was blaming everyone for the way my life was. It wasn't until I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and opened up that blue book to page 8. Page 8 is the story, or that first story is the story of one of our co-founders, Bill Wilson. And on page 8, Bill explains his first step experience. And he puts it into words, and I think he puts it into words for all of us. When he says, no words could tell of the loneliness and despair I felt in a bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I met my match. I've been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. And for the first time in my life, at the age of 29 years old, sitting in a chair just like you guys are sitting in that chair, in the middle of Newark Airport, I think drinking might be a problem. Now, a blind man can see that, but aren't we the last to see our problems? And all of a sudden, about 3-4 minutes later, a complete stranger sat next to me. And after a couple of minutes, this gentleman looked at me and said, What's your problem? I mean, people weren't asking me how my pension was going or that brand new car I bought back then. I mean, what's wrong with you, dude? And I spit my life story up on a complete stranger. And after a couple of minutes, that man looked at me and said, I have the answer for you. And I said, what's that? And he wrote down an address on a piece of paper. And he asked me a very important question. He goes, is it possible for you not to take a drink the rest of this day? And I was honest with him. I want to drink right now. It's like 10 o'clock in the morning. He said, not to drink and be at this address at 7 o'clock tonight. And all I could tell you is at 7 o'clock that night, with my knees knocking, my stomach churning, my mind going a million miles an hour, a 1979 Chevy Impala pulled up on me. And that stranger was driving that car. And he was in the car with a couple of other strangers. And when they rolled up on me and rolled the window down, they said the most spiritual thing you'll ever hear in AA or CA. Let me tell you that right now. And what they said was, get in the car. And I got in the car with these gentlemen, and they brought me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've been sober ever since. Now, that doesn't mean I got on some spiritual rocket ship and went up, up, and away. That's not my story. It's not the story of many of us. Matter of fact, I don't even know that guy or that woman. I know one. She's on right now, but spiritual giant that she is. But the truth of the matter is, man, my recovery's been, I don't know. I look at you guys. How many guys have relapsed? I've never relapsed, thank God. But my life has been, I've grown, I've hit walls, I've grown, I've hit walls, I've grown, I've hit walls. And I think that's necessary for us to grow, is to hit walls. Now, that sounds counterproductive, doesn't it? But it's these constant surrenders, you know? And as I, got my life back in order and, I got back with that wife, believe it or not, and, got a house, got a job, my physical health came back. I mean, I really got a lot back quickly. But at 5 years, I'm in that guy's apartment. I got a rope. I just need a bridge to jump off because I'm dying of this thing. And I'm not talking about it way because I suffer from this thing called ego and pride. See, my ego won't allow me to go up to a guy like, Bobby or whoever else is on here, or, Nathan, or any of the girls, I can't go up to you and tell you what's going on because I'm too prideful. My ego won't allow it. So I'm the guy that's in your meetings and you say, hey, Jimmy, how you doing? And my veins are about to pop out and everything's great because I don't even know how to talk about this. And some of that is a residual effect of living on the streets because, man, I seem to have lost my education. I seem to have lost my voice. I've lost a lot when I was out there. And I'm afraid of men. Imagine that. Tough guy like me is afraid of men, right? Because I come from that old, real men are strong, real men don't cry, real men, all that bullshit that's on the streets. I think that's true until I land here and find out the truth, right? And so, at 5 years, I meet this guy at a meeting. I'm lying at a meeting. I'm paralyzed by what everyone thinks about me. And he called me out on it. I want to start a fist fight because that's how I handle confrontation with violence. I don't know how to have a normal, healthy conversation with another man in AA. I want to fight him. But God does for me what I could never do for myself. And I say to him, you're right, I need help. And I find myself in that guy's apartment, that at the 5-year mark. Get no spiritual questions. He one of the things he did for me that day was he made this so simplistic, what recovery looks like. He said, Jimmy, we only have 2 goals in AA, and I think we only have 2 goals in CA, right? The first goal is not to pick up, right? That's the obvious one. Don't pick up. But the second goal is the goal I hope that everyone would want to attain, and that's to step into the sunlight of the spirit, to have a spiritual experience, to have a personality change, to have a transformation. Because I don't know about anyone in here. I don't know how long I would have lasted if I kept on living on the streets and drinking. The fact that I'm 67 years old and, and 38 and change sober, it's mind-boggling to me still. Right? So when that guy talked to me that day, he sat with me and he talked about painting me into the corner, bringing into the spiritual principles of the world. Spiritual warriors walk towards their problems. They don't run from their problems. I've been running from my problems forever. He would talk about the road to God, the path to God is not a straight line. It's like if I say I'm going to the top of the mountain, it's not a straight line, it's trails and like this the whole way. The path to God, the path to a higher power, the path to spirituality, it's a path of potholes and mines, landmines. And the problem is we're all going to have troubles because that's life. And I guess that's my topic now that I got to it. Living life on life's terms. Or more importantly, living life on God's terms. Because it sounds really simple that when shit hits the fan, that we could just open up the book to page 317 in the first edition, fourth edition, or 417 or 449 in the third edition. Open up the Dr. Paul story, read his thing about acceptance, click our heels, and in some magical way, understand that nothing happened in God's world by mistake. Now, if that's your story, I'm happy for you. That's not my story. My story of living life on life's terms and trying to do this thing in a fashion which reflects spirituality has been claw marks, blood, like it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy, right? So the process of the 12 steps was the thing that started to get me free, and, as I went through the steps with this guy and I started to uncover, discover, and discard the things in my life that were blocking me, the walls started to come down. I started to get down to the common manifestations of living a life on self-will, right? I started to look at all those things that self-create. It's the anger, the resentments we talk about in the fourth step, the grievances we walk around with. How many of us are sitting here tonight pissed off about something, right? And what I found out is this. If I'm angry, if I'm pissed off, if I'm resentful, if I'm holding a grudge, three things are occurring. One, I'm taking everything personal. That's why I'm pissed off. Two, I'm blaming you. That's why I'm pissed off. Or three, I'm trying to do something that is impossible, and that's to control life and to control the situation in my life. And I didn't know that, right? I thought I had that power to control the situations in my life. But you see, powerlessness means across the board everything, right? And I had to come to find that. The amount of fear I had in my life. Like I said, I'm a tough guy. I'm not afraid of anything. Well, I'm afraid of everything. I didn't know that. I didn't know that until I got it out of here and got it on paper and started to examine that stuff. And then the harms I caused. Not only the sexual harms, not only the physical harms, not only the emotional harms, the financial harms. There was a long list I had to get to make amends and clean up my past. There was a lot of money that had to come out of my pocket to clean up that past. The financial harms were probably the hardest ones. Well, maybe they weren't the hardest ones. There was some to my parents. There was some to, close friends, my sisters, my siblings, So this idea of walking towards God, walking towards a spiritual life, walking on this path to some sort of sanity took a long while. It's not an overnight matter, as we're told, right? And adversities are going to happen. Life is going to hit us between the eyes sometimes. And none of us are immune to that. I tell this story all the time. I was 18 months sober. My father, like I said, I had daddy issues. I hated my father. But something happened when I got sober. My dad started to see a different man. And all I did was really bring you home. I brought the things I heard in meetings home. I started to talk about my life. The ice started to melt between us two. And when I was 18 months sober, I walked into my house and I found my father dead. He was 63 years old. And I come from a time when, everything was, 12-step calls and going out and getting drunks and drug addicts out of houses and bringing them to meetings. And, we didn't have treatment centers on every corner. We didn't have sober houses like you guys are living in. We had none of that stuff in the early days. That makes me sound old, but the truth of the matter is that's what it was. So what do? We bring you to an AA meeting. We bring you to an NA meeting, some kind of meeting, right? and you would shake and bake in a window, in a chair in a meeting. The old timers carried a pint of whiskey in the car in case you really needed a drink, so you didn't go into the DTs. Right? So I know what it sounds like when someone needs help. I could hear that. So when I find my father dead, I call my sponsor up. My sponsor says, "Hey, call 911. Let's pray." He's praying. I'm crying. First cop shows up. And the cop's taking the information down. And he looks at me, he goes, "Hey, I don't see you walking on the streets anymore." And I said, "Yeah, I don't do that anymore." He said, "Matter of fact, I don't even see you drinking in the bars anymore or on the street corners." And I said, "Yeah, I don't do that anymore." And he asked me, "How do you do that?" And before you know it, I'm telling this cop about my drinking because he started to talk about his drinking to me. He was telling me about the unmanageability of his life as a police officer. He was telling me about once he started, he couldn't stop because he had no power, choice, and control. He told me about how he was getting jammed up on the job and he was having problems at home. Now, he didn't live in my city, even though he was a cop in my city. But when he told me where he lived, I said, "Hey, I know a meeting in that town, and I know a bunch of guys in that town. And if you go to a meeting and meet those guys, they're going to help you." And I left it at that. About 2 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, I'm in my home group down here on the Jersey Shore. We have a big home group. We get about 300 people every Sunday night, except for tonight because it was so cold. Uh, the girls are over there reading the book. Guys are over there reading the book. It's a pocket of enthusiasm. I'm up front with a bunch of my sponsees, probably lying about something. And I get a tap on my shoulder, and all of a sudden I turn around. This guy's looking at me and goes, "I've been looking for you." And I said, "Who are you?" He goes, "I was the police officer that was with you on your day that your dad died. And I've been looking for you because I know you moved and I moved, and I just couldn't contact with you, but I wanted to find you because I needed to tell you something." I said, "What's that?" He goes, "I went to that meeting you talked about the day after your dad died, and I met those guys that you talked about, and they took me under their wing. And I'm here to let you know that I just celebrated 34 years of sobriety." Now, I don't have the power to get anyone drunk, or I don't have the power to get anyone sober, but let me tell you something. God will use you without your permission. See, my first spiritual truth came true there. And this goes for everyone, no matter who you are, no matter what fellowship you're in, that in order to get out of the darkness of my life, I got to serve others. I got to carry this message to the next sick and suffering alcoholic and drug addict. That the paradox of recovery is this: in order to keep it, I got to give it away. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I thought this was about attaining. See, recovery is really about one thing and only one thing. It's about subtraction, not addition. That I had to start filtering out and getting rid of all the things in my life. Because living life on life's terms means I got to really turn my will and my life over to a power called God, or whatever your higher power is. That's the beauty of recovery and 12-step programs. You choose. We're not in dogma. We're not in a religion. You choose what you want as a higher power. Now, I don't go for doorknobs and chairs and light bulbs like in the early 80s like they used to do. But I live right on the beach here. I mean, ocean is beautiful. Nature. People have nature as a higher power. Or some people go back to their life of religion, which is, God, Yahweh, Buddha, you name it, right? But I have to be connected to something. So my journey in recovery, really, it's, this idea of living life on life's terms, coming to accept the things that happen in my life. I'm looking at those shades behind your guys' heads right there, right? And I'm looking at step 10, continue to take personal inventory. When I was wrong, promptly admit it. It sounds like, and this is what I thought when I first came into AA, it sounds like when you screw up, you acknowledge that you're a screw up. You might make amends or say, "I'm sorry" to somebody and move on with your day. And nothing is further from the truth, especially when you read our literature. And I know CA reads the book Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you go to the 10th step, it tells me I've entered the world of the spirit. I've had a spiritual experience as a result of the first 9 steps, right? And there's a certain language, there's a certain way we live our lives, there's a certain way we talk with each other when we live in the sunlight of the spirit. And when I say the sunlight of the spirit, it's not a destination. It's a place. It's a place where we get comfortable in our skin. It's a place where I'm not running after a drink or a drug anymore. It's a place where I start to experience freedom. It's a place where, I experience neutrality, safe and protected. That I can go to a restaurant with a bar and not think about a drink. I can go to a party and not think about a drink. I can do a lot of things. I can go to a Yankee game or a Dodger game, or I can go somewhere and not think about a drink. Right? Bill Wilson calls it the perfect place. Called it utopia. Right? Now, in order to get out into the darkness or out into the sunlight of the spirit, a price has to be paid. It means the destruction of self-centeredness, right? It means that I need to go through these 12 steps and start to uncover, discover, and discard the things that create my self-reliance and all the things that make me think I'm in charge of everything, right? I mean, I read this thing out of Daily Reflections. If you don't know what Daily Reflections is, it's a book in Alcoholics Anonymous that it's like a prayer, not, I guess you call it a prayer book. It's a daily prayer, right? And if you turn to May 1st and you read the second paragraph on it, I think it's one of the greatest little readings I've ever read. It says it's a side of myself that I refuse to look at that rules me. I must be willing to look at the dark side in order to heal my mind and my heart, because that's the road to freedom. I must walk into darkness to find the light, walk into fear to find peace. See, a price has to be paid for recovery. A price has to be paid to get free, right? I could take you downstairs. I could bring you all downstairs right now, put this thing right on the kitchen table. And just like I sit with every guy that I've ever sponsored and taken through the steps, I point down to this way of my house. And there's a glass door that leads out, right? And on most days, other than today, because it was a snowstorm, it's a beautiful sunny day on the Jersey Shore, right? Walk through that glass door, you'll be a free man, you'll be a free woman. But in order to walk out that door, you got to walk through the darkness of the hallway. And you got to uncover, discover, and discard the things that are blocking you from God and blocking you from each other. I mean, I just look at the houses you guys are sitting in right now. How many chameleons are still in the house? How many people are still pretending to be someone they're not? How many people really want to be free, but they don't know how to be free? How many people are dying for help and they're not getting the help they need? How many people don't have a sponsor? How many people don't have a home group? How many people don't go through the steps? Right? And then we wonder why our life sucks. Because we have to walk through the darkness of our lives. And we have to uncover, discover, and discard the things that are blocking us. And we have to start to learn how to live life on God's terms rather than my terms. Because if you live on Jimmy's terms, guess what? My life's a mess. Drinking or not drinking. Drugging or not drugging. Right? When they talk about restless, irritable discontent, that's hitting both sides of the coin, drinking or not drinking. So, so this idea of walking through that darkness into the sunlight of the spirit, the way the old timers would put it would be like this, AA, I'll say CA, because most of you guys are in CA. It's like a big bonfire, right? Everyone's walking around the fire. Everyone's happy, warm fire, especially on a cold night like here in Jersey, right? But eventually that fire is going to burn out, right? But if you really want to change, if you really want to grow, if you really want to have an experience, if you really want a new life, let's just say it that way. If you really want a new life, guess what? You got to walk through that fire and get your ass burnt and feel the uncomfortability of change. The problem with relapse is we give up. We always give up. And I never relapse, but I sponsor a lot of guys that have. And why they relapse? Well, we have our list. Yeah, stop calling my sponsor, stop going to meetings, stop praying, stop meditating. No, I think it's a little bit more deeper than that. We're afraid to change. We're afraid to become someone different. Sometimes we don't even think we can become different. I've been living this way of life for so long, I'm hopeless. And because I'm hopeless, I don't take advantage of I don't take advantage of the feast that has been put at my feet. Right? Every time I walk into a meeting, it's a feast. It's up to me to get to the table. and start taking the things that are going to benefit a guy like me. But because of fear, I'll sit in the back room, I'll sit in the last row, I'll be checking out the girls, and thinking about other things. I'll be on my phone watching a football game or whatever the case may be. See, the price of recovery is about walking through the fear, right? And see, fear will always revolve around three things: not getting what I want, losing what I already have, or being found out, right? And as a result of that, I stand stagnant in my recovery. It's like I'm in quicksand and my legs are going nowhere. So this whole idea of, going into the sunlight of the spirit, to have this spiritual experience. And if it's not happening, well, ask yourself a few questions. This is what the old timers would tell us: a guy likes me, little guys like us. All right. Have you done an inventory? Right? Or are you procrastinating on that inventory that your sponsor is asking you to write for the last 3, 4, 5 weeks? Right? Do I have any unfinished amends? Now, here's a question you could really think about. Does not finishing my amends have anything to do with me drinking and drugging again? Right? Well, probably, and there's a few other things, but I think one of the most important thing is, do I live under the delusion that I'm going to walk out into the sunlight of the spirit with a secret in my back pocket, thinking I'm going to be a free man or a free woman? Right? So this whole deal, this thing we live, is about rigorous honesty. One of the things we read tonight, or we didn't read, the speaker was speaking about, she said a certain word. She said the word capacity, right? Capacity. Do I have the capacity to get sober? Do I have the capacity to live a good life? Do I have a capacity to get all the things that you guys got, right? And how it works, it talks about, that we suffer from grave emotional mental disorders. That doesn't mean we're crazy. Oh, some of us are crazy. But what that really means is that I have a mind that keeps taking me back to what's killing me, the drink or the drug. And that looks like this: I'm not drinking today, I'm not drugging today, I'm not drinking today, I'm not drugging today. And before you know it, I'm drinking and I'm drugging and I'm on a 3-day run. How'd that happen? That wasn't the intent. But the mind, because I have no power, choice, or control in my mind, will always take me back to what's killing me. Lack of power is my dilemma, right? I have no power to stop that. So I need to have an experience with this power called God, or whatever your higher power is, right? Step 10 is about coming to an understanding that God is doing for me what I could never do for myself. Our anonymous programs that we're in, AA, CA, NA, whatever A it is, it's not self-help. It's God reliant. And I got to clear the hallway for that relationship to happen. I got to clear the hallway, right? And I got to deal with life on life's terms. Because even though things could be great, shit's going to happen. We're all going to have our turn in the barrel. That's life. Told you about my dad dying. December 6, 1999. I got a great job. I worked on the highway authority. And I was in a horrific accident on December 6, 1999. I've had 41 surgeries in the last 20 years. I've had 12 back operations, 3 knee replacements, basically rebuilt again. I always like to say I'm 5'4", like my friend over here, but I'm really 6'4". All the metal they put in me, right? I saw a guy, I don't know where he is. He was on here before, B. I had a neck brace for a while too, dude. I know what that feels like. I don't know what your situation was, but man, when I saw you with your neck brace, I was like, oh my God. I don't regret those days. But not only have I had, emotional pain, physical pain. I've been through divorce. I blew up my life in sobriety. You know, I made a lot of mistakes in sobriety. I've hit the wall in sobriety, you know. But thank God for the willingness to get up and do it again. Get up and do it again. Get up and do it again. I've been very fortunate to have great men in my life. Kindness of strangers, right? That's what we have. We have kindness of strangers. People we don't even know are helping each other. I'm sure there's guys in your houses, as I look at your houses, you guys didn't know any each other until you landed in that house, and you're trying to help each other stay sober. You're trying to go to meetings together. You're trying to, you know, whatever you're doing in that house. And I'm sure you're trying to work together. And not all of us are going to make it. That's the sad thing, right? But the question is, am I even trying? Am I even willing to walk through that fear? You know, to walk into peace. You know, it's an incredible feeling to feel peaceful at times. I didn't think that was possible for a guy like me, because I have a head that just doesn't stop. Right? And to experience some of the attributes that we get in here. You know, I went through the steps one day, and a guy asked me, my sponsor at the time asked me a very important question. I'll throw it out there for consideration tonight. Do you look at the people in your life, whether it's your parents, your siblings, your parole officer, your buddies, your brothers and sisters, your aunts and uncles, your boss at the job, you know, your fellowship that you go to, your home group, people in traffic, people in the grocery store? Do you look at the people in your life, the situations in your life, like, I don't have a job, I don't have money, I don't have a girlfriend, I don't have this, I don't have that, or the circumstances of your life? Do I look at the people in my life? Do I look at the situations in my life? Do I look at the circumstances in my life through the lens of a character defect, anger, rage, envy, jealousy? I mean, I can keep going with the character defects. Or can I look at those things through the eyes of God with love, tolerance, compassion, forgiveness, right? Is that really the goal here? I think it is the goal here. And the good news is this, that we're all capable of attaining the goal because of the capacity. I'll bring you back to that word capacity for a reason. And how it works, it says people who have these mental, you know, this obsessive mind that just keeps bringing you back, they can recover too. Doesn't mean we're crazy. Yeah, we're a little crazy, some of us, but this mental obsession could be lifted. The obsession could be taken away. You can recover from that. You open up our book, it says we have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. All right? If this was a cup of coffee and I left it on this desk, right? Full cup of coffee on my desk right now, and I left it there for a year, what do you think that coffee would look like, or smell like after a year? It'd be dirty, stinky, probably a little bit of mold on there, right? But do you know what I could do with that cup? I could pick that cup up and walk into the bathroom. I could dump that coffee out. And I could wash that cup out. And that cup has the capacity to be refilled with new coffee. Well, guess what? Everyone on this call has the capacity to be refilled after we empty out of God's love, God's purpose, God's spirit, right? But it doesn't come for free. The price has to be paid. It means the destruction of our self-centeredness. That I got to get down the causes and conditions of this thing called alcoholism or drug addiction. And I got to walk through the darkness of my life to uncover, discover, and discard the things that are blocking me. And to get it out of here where everything looks real and get it in black and white. And more importantly, have a sponsor that I can read this stuff to and hold his hand, and he can hold my hand. Because a sponsor only has one job. That's to get your hand out of my hand and put it into the hand of God. That's it, right? We lead by example. And for anyone here as a sponsor, you know that, right? My job is not to boss. My job is not to tell you what to do or try to control your life. My job is let go and let God. Let go and let God. Now that sounds very simplistic, right? We throw that language out. How the hell do you let go and you let God? Well, you go through the 12 steps of whatever program you're in, right? Uncover, discover, discard, make those amends, finish that inventory, create a prayer life, create an inventory life, but more importantly, the gift. And I hope everyone on this call gets the gift, especially during the holiday season. There's a gift here. This spiritual experience, the priceless gift Bill talks about in the 12 and 12, right? The priceless gift. So here's the question of the night. What am I doing with the gift of sobriety? What am I doing with the gift of recovery? Am I squandering it away like I've squandered away 100 times? Or am I really taking advantage of what God has put in my life? He's put a roof over my head with a bunch of men that want the same thing that I do, right? Now, I know when you put a bunch of guys in one room, we're all, like gorillas, right? But are we really doing God's work and trying to help each other? Because step 3 is really about one thing and only one thing. Stop playing God and help his kids. That's it. And if I do those 2 simple things, like most good fathers do for their children, God will take care of me. And I'll get everything I need other than what I want. That's the problem with a guy with me. I want this, I want that. No, God will give me everything I need. And what I found out, and I'm going to end on this, is that this spiritual life that we live, this spirituality that we try to live, is really about like a sick potted plant, right? The sick flower. We rip that flower out of that sick soil, and we put it on this new spiritual soil. And as Bill would talk about, roots grasp new soil. Our roots start to grow, and we start to grow in our sobriety. And our world starts to open up. And we start to meet people like we have on this call tonight. And all of a sudden we have friendships and relationships and just a beautiful life, one day at a time. And it's a gift. Don't squander your gift. That's all I have. Thank you.